I am Diksha Gera, and I lead the payments and fintech coverage for Bloomberg Intelligence. And it's been a busy couple of weeks with earnings and all, but I was really excited about this panel, largely because of the amazing panelists we have. Please join me in welcoming Larry Zelvin, who is the EVP and Head of Financial Crimes at BMO. We have Ranjita Iyer, who heads services for Mastercard in North America. And we have Patricia Voight, who's the CISO at Webster Bank. So let's start with a poll. I think you guys have had enough of being a passive audience. Time to get doing some work now, okay? How many of you work in financial services? Okay, and how many of you work at banks? Interesting. Let me start with a little personal story. It's late in the evening. We were in Kenya for a holiday a couple of years ago, and it was one of the conservancies there. They actually hire local tribes to do the tour guides stuff there. And so this person is taking us around. We're getting to know each other. It's like a nice, safari ride. And he asks us to get us just to kind of understand who we are and what we, how much we are worth. How much land do you have? And I'm like, okay, my husband has some ancestral property, but we're like, we've always lived in cities. We don't have land. Then he was like, oh, where do you keep your cows? Yeah. And at that point, I'm like, okay, there is parts of the world that still has this conversation. So we tell him we don't have any cows, and we are really surprised at this conversation, right? The funny part was, as surprised as we were with him, he was surprised with us. How do you pay for school fees? And I'm like, dude, we put money at a bank, and he was giving us these looks. I could tell he was really judging us on that. But it brought a very fundamental question to my mind. First principles, right? When you first went and put money at a bank, and they gave you a slip of paper saying they owe you this, just think about what it meant. What is a bank if not the trust that you place in it, right? And nowadays, they don't even bother with the slip of paper. It's all online, right? So what proof do you have, sir, that you have that much money with a bank, right? So all of this to just kind of draw home the point that the basic fundamental of financial services is identity and trust. And if it is not for this, we can't exist as an industry. And now imagine when you go into your mobile app and you see every now and then there's a transaction which you have not heard of and you don't know what the hell is going on there. How many of us are going to go back to gold and dollar bills under the pillow? I didn't say crypto. But yeah, let's start with another poll now. How many of you have gotten a message that you haven't paid your toll when you don't even drive, or even if you do? Please raise your hands.
A lot.
I'm in the US and I get this emails from the UK saying that I haven't paid toll. How many of you gotten a call from something that looks like a bank and is not? True that, right? Very relatable. So we have a fairly young audience here. You can thank me later. But anecdotally, some of the largest hit segments of society are the older people who've not been prepared for digital fraud, who are almost embarrassed to admit that they've been struck by a love scam. And that is the challenge that you face, when you're going in as a bank and you're losing their trust to kind of deal with you on a day-to-day basis. So we won't blame them, right, Larry? They were not from an era where, when they first started banking, you needed guns and a team to go and loot a bank, right? Not some 15-year-old in a garage with access to Papa's laptop, right? So it's a very different era. And I was so amazed when we were talking about this, and Larry kind of pointed out, from back in the day to where we are now, where money moves in seconds, how has financial crime evolved?
Well, I think you highlighted it to some degree. I mean, before the internet, you'd actually needed proximity to commit these crimes. I mean, if you just think about robbing a bank, it was really annoying. You had to get a car. You had to get a horse. You had to ride your car or horse to the institution. Once you got to the institution, you had to scare everybody, potentially with a weapon. There might be somebody at the bank who has a weapon. So now you have to face that risk. Then you had to ask for the money. and unfortunately, you'd had to carry it out. It became very inconvenient. Now you had to get back in the car, in the horse. The police could chase you. It was really inconvenient. The great thing about the internet is all that is much easier, right? You don't need a weapon. You can stay in your mother and dad's basement. You can rob 100 banks in the afternoon, and the best news is you can automate it all. So all you have to do is sit back, relax, and enjoy the profits.
See, that's how things have changed, right? So we know how crime has evolved. Patty, how have the bad actors evolved? Like, there's a report from NASDAQ on financial crime that says this is a $485 billion amount of the problem globally. And so this is not petty crime we are talking about, right?
No. These days in the digital environment, huge volumes of transactions of data that are making movement. And I think some of the ones we've seen recently, right? You're now seeing involvement with some of the bad actors using AI, deep fakes, right? And being able to submit something to the executive, the CFO, that looks like it's coming from the CEO, directing them to deposit a certain amount of money. And it is realistic enough and believable that they're actually doing that in some instances, right? And we've seen that a couple times out in the industry. You're also seeing the threat actors, they're working together. Their nation states, their organized crime units, they're working together to be able to partner to leverage kind of ransomware as a service and other malware and other types of phishing environments and bots out there to be able to expand upon it and really bring in some revenue.
Larry, you were talking about organized camps of people in some of the emerging markets, right? That are basically designed to, there's human trafficking involved, and then on top of that, there is financial fraud. Like, can you cite some of those examples?
Sure. Unfortunately, we have a business component and a security component in Asia, and this is prevalent in Asia, but you're also starting to see it in Latin America. But unfortunately, that people are being recruited to places like Cambodia, Myanmar, on these potentially IT jobs, and it sounds very attractive, high-skilled, English language, well-paying. They get to these places and they look like a resort, but in reality, they're fraud farms. It is estimated that hundreds of thousands of people are actually being imprisoned in these farms. They steal their passports. Some cases they're being shackled, not being given food, beaten. They have quotas. So as you heard, when you heard about the tolls, or you're hearing about the banks, or you have potential parking tickets, it could be a dual-edged crime. You actually may be being solicited by someone who is imprisoned and is in a human trafficking scheme, and they're not allowed out until they actually made a certain revenue, and even that sometimes is not enough to break free.
So that puts in context what banks are kind of dealing with and fighting in today's world, right? JP Morgan Chase went out and said they actually fight 45 billion cyber events daily. And that point is not lost on you, right, Ranjita? So Mastercard went and bought $2.65 billion worth of a cybersecurity company. Mm-hmm. Can you share, like, how did you even get into this business?
Yep, absolutely. Scary start to the panel with a lot of stories around horses and guns and things. But yeah, so from a Mastercard perspective, I would say we've always been in that trust business in a sense. So when you swipe your card, you never have to really think about, okay, am I paying this merchant? How is that payment happening? Is it going to end up with a fraudster? Sometimes it does, right? So we all know that. And that's why fraud's been escalating. However, if you think about it, we've been protecting transactions for a very long time, right? So well over 2 decades, we've been using AI models and things like that. But then what we realize is as we're protecting transactions, the fraud is moving. So over the years, as we're working with issuers and things, we've noticed that everyone's getting more sophisticated. Everyone's applying AI, everyone's applying models. So the fraud at the time of the transaction is going down. However, it's migrating. It's migrating to identity fraud. It's migrating to bad devices, usage of devices to trick the ecosystem, make it look like it's human when it's a bot. And then you take it even one step further and you're looking at cybercrime. So me and Diksha were talking before, the cybercrime problem in the globe is over $10 trillion, which in GDP terms would be the 3rd largest country on the planet. So this is a huge problem. So cyber is really critical to us. We had to move to the cyber realm because that's where credentials are getting breached. That's where PII is getting out there. All of this data is out there on the web, on the dark web, that people or threat actors are able to use that to perpetrate fraud into the financial ecosystem. So therefore, protecting the cyber ecosystem and the cyber environment is really critical to ensuring that we end up with safe payments at the end of the day.
Actually, so true, right? Again, raise of hands, how many of you have actually had an incident where your card was stolen? Credit card or worse still, debit card? I've had an incident very recently where someone's booking ski tickets at a resort for tomorrow on my card today, and we couldn't do anything about it. Like, that person is there, I'm calling the resort, and I can't do anything about it, right? And from here, that is so unnerving. We are moving to account, direct transfers now, right? So, Patricia, tell us, how does that complicate things? Because that's not a secured network to kind of transfer money real time, right?
Yeah, and the challenge was that, again, it's the velocity of it, the speed in which it's moving. It's the ability to move it through many major accounts quickly. And it's also a matter of, the timing of it prevents the ability to do fraud detection quickly, and also, concerns that you're going to have around recourse and actions and follow-up, right? So, one of the ways to really kind of counter that, and I think you talked about it earlier, Webster Bank, we do a lot of cybersecurity awareness and fraud training for especially the group of customers for us, which is our seniors. And the more training and the more skills that you're able to get out, the information that you're sharing out there is very helpful.
Absolutely.
And I'd like to add, actually, from an account-to-account perspective, she's absolutely right? The velocity of the money. And that's a really key factor. Now, in certain markets, in the US, a little bit harder to do because we've got a lot of financial institutions, but in certain markets where it's a little bit more concentrated, like say, think Canada, the UK, you can layer security on. So you can have models that are looking at that flow between, say, 5 banks in a consortium way to kind of figure out, hey, is this transaction look right, or does it look anomalous? The other thing you can also do is be checking the identity of the sender and the receiver account, right? With account information to kind of ensure that, does this look like an account that is legit, potentially belongs to this person, or could it have been an account that was taken over? So layering on security on top is also a potential way to kind of protect those types of transactions.
Yeah, and I think that's where the card networks kind of add a very valuable layer, like leveraging your data. I think you're a very unique spot on our panel today because you're using your data not just to protect yourself, but also provide that service to the ecosystem, right? Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit more about what parts of cybersecurity do you really work on versus like, do you do like network security or like the common cybersecurity companies that kind of talk about it?
So ours is a lot more around protecting the financial transaction, if you will, whether it's account to account, card transactions, et cetera. So where we kind of get involved and where we help our customers is obviously at the point of the transaction, but also identity. So synthetic identity is a huge problem in the ecosystem. Account takeovers is a big problem in the ecosystem. So we have tools and capabilities that can help with that. We have behavioral biometrics and other capabilities that can tell whether this is really Patricia or if it's somebody else because of the way that they're utilizing the phone and the way they're interacting with their device. And then on top of that, we also help with post-transaction capabilities as well. So think chargebacks, digital receipts. How do you manage your subscriptions? Because subscriptions is a huge vector of fraud and or chargeback. So think of that entire payment ecosystem, what happens before the transaction, during, and post, and all of our capabilities kind of help ourselves and our customers in all of those areas.
Absolutely, and those are generally the points that are the biggest points of vulnerability when money is exchanging hands, essentially, right?
That's right.
Larry, you've done this for a while, all the large banks, you have like so much experience seeing how this has kind of evolved and what are some of the best practices. Can you talk to us a little bit about what is the broader security framework at BMO that you're kind of working with?
Sure, I've never felt younger, thank you. But it's all good. No, look, what attracted me to BMO was that it was the first bank, and there's been others that followed, that combined cyber, fraud, physical security, and crisis management. What was exciting to me was the ability to use data in a way that I thought was rather innovative, to understand the customer holistically, to understand all the ways we interact with the customer. And we're progressing nicely in that areas, particularly as you start looking at AI and machine learning, and how do we not only prevent frauds, but also hopefully predict them and get ahead, and also to really understand how they're attacked. I want to know, where is the most deposit frauds happening in our branches? Where are we seeing the most account takeovers? Is that in these applications? Is it perhaps in our websites? One of the mantras in cybersecurity right now is why hack in when you can log in. So credential stealing is really the biggest problem we're having. And from a security perspective, that's really, really hard because it looks like the customer or it looks like the employee. So you've got to look for that anomalous behavior. So those are just some areas. I could go on quite some time, but I was told to be punchy, so hopefully that was punchy.
Why hack in when you can log in? And he asked me to introduce him as head of financial crimes, not crimes unit. So I'd like to point that out there. And about age, like talk to him about AI and you'll know what age he is. So Mastercard, Michael mentioned on the call, you're detecting 40% more fraud this year versus last year. What you know, Larry keeps saying, you know what you know, but you don't know what you don't know. So, but 40% is very impressive nonetheless, right? I'm sure not all the banks have the financial muscle to kind of keep investing in this space, even though it is a very emerging threat. How do your interactions or work with larger banks differ from the smaller banks? And you partner with all of them, right?
Yeah, we partner with all of them. And I would say a lot of the large banks, they're much more sophisticated. They have a lot of resources. They have large fraud teams of their own. And they can put a lot of muscle behind these kinds of threats. With the smaller banks, they tend to be a lot more reliant on their processors. So kind of we work with the processors as well to ensure that whatever capabilities we have, we're sharing with the processors so the small banks can get it through their processors. So that's how we kind of cover the market. But from the 40% increase, we're always working on our models. And one of the most recent improvements that we've put in is with generative AI, to use all of the data that we see to actually predict what the next transaction coming from that particular merchant and cardholder could be. Okay. And when that transaction comes over, if it's far beyond that realm of possibility, we're able to flag it as well. So we keep adding on second and third stage models to our AI models that are looking at.
It's always a challenge, right? Like yesterday, Pfizer was saying you can bring down fraud to zero, but then your auth rates will completely go down the drain, right? That's the constant challenge that financial firms are kind of battling when you're moving towards real-time transactions, right? Larry, you guys have been using AI forever in this space, right? Can you tell how some of those use cases have evolved? Like what is the latest that you're kind of using, and how is it different?
Yeah, look, I think we're still very much in the infancy stages of AI. I think it's kind of a novelty. When you talk cybersecurity, to me, it's still very much a cocktail conversation. And I don't mean that as any disrespect, but it seems more academic, more notional. In the fraud space, it's alive and well. It is absolutely part of how we defend and protect our customers. If I can share one quick story, we have an authentication tool that's AI-based. And I go sit with our fraud operations teams, and they're located around the world. And I don't want PowerPoint slides. I actually want to sit with the analysts as they're actually doing the calls. So one of the analysts listens to a call to our call center, and this woman in this case calls up and says, hey, by the way, you've frozen my checks. I need you to unfreeze my checks. So this AI model, there's an assigned percentage of probability that it's a fraudster, and the number was rather high. So the analyst is kind of going, geez, this is probably not a customer, but somebody trying to commit a crime. So the analyst says, well, look, all I need you to do is go to one of our branches. Please bring your driver's license. We'll release the fraud. We just need to validate it's you. Well, the woman on the call says, well, I'm sorry, there's no BMO branch near me. The person in the call center goes, well, ma'am, I'm looking at your address. There's actually a BMO branch 3 miles away. I can give you the address. You can drive. And she goes, oh, well, thank you very much. This call hangs up. She now listens to the next call. Same woman, same voice. This time her ATM is frozen, and she needs it unfrozen. She's going to keep calling our call center over and over again until somebody authenticates her and she's able to commit the fraud. Right. If it wasn't for AI, we would never be able to connect those dots and never be able to tell the analyst that the person you're talking to isn't a customer but a fraudster.
Right.
There's a lot of like data connectivity, even insurance firms use this a lot to identify outliers in transactions, right? But not all is hunky-dory when you're using AI. Like we've faced or heard of so many challenges that come along the way. So Patty, we had this as one of the audience questions as well. Like, what are the challenges that you guys are facing when you're using AI?
Yeah, and I think one of the challenges you have is perhaps someone inadvertently not necessarily being aware within your environment, taking the data that you have, perhaps sensitive data, customer data, and then using it in an environment where oftentimes you're used to kind of using ChatGPT on your phone in your home environment, how you may use it to have efficiencies, and cutting and pasting that and then putting it out and not realizing that's going outside the domains of your corporate environment and out into kind of the public domain, right? And once it's out there, it can kind of expand and get pulled into other situations, and that's very concerning for a lot of people, right? The risk increases at that point.
And talking about complexity, right, it only increases, right? There's only one way it moves. So now we're talking about not just regular card transactions, we are talking about agentic commerce. I don't know how many of you caught this, but there were a couple of really interesting product drops, and Mastercard is kind of working on that problem as well, right? Ranjita, can you just lay out, like, what does it look like and what is the complexity? Just explain to us.
So the beauty of agentic commerce is, and me and Larry were talking before in the green room, it's very exciting because here you have an agent who is working on your behalf. You can tell it, give it parameters of your trip to Thailand and have it book all your flights, all of your activities, maybe get a couple of restaurant reservations, and off it goes. It has your credential, and it with your consent, of course, it is able to do that. But the complexity is, and as Larry pointed out very well in the room, is, well, how do you authenticate that? How do you know that it's your agent? How do you know that the agent wasn't taken over? How do you know that, have you done proper KYA? Know your agent on this, right? So I think those are all of the complexities that come along with it. I think from a technological perspective, we're there. Technology can do this today. I think the infrastructure around it, the authentication around it, the fraud and safety and security aspects, and the program around it that you wrap around that is very interesting and exciting, but it opens up so many great possibilities of booking the trip, which I don't have to spend hours doing, so which would be great for me.
So it was very fun to see the agent actually come up with ideas and propose what I should buy. But I don't know about folks in the room. I love that it asks me for permission to spend my money. We'll eventually get to a point
My
where
kids don't do that, so, you know.
See, that's what we are moving towards then. So Larry, I'll probably end with you on this. So tell us a little bit more about what are the pitfalls that people need to watch out when leveraging AI for financial fraud and security.
Sure. I used to work in Washington, so I'm going to answer my question, and I'll answer hers. The other thing that we talk a lot about AI, but most financial institutions, honestly, most of the frauds, the high-level frauds we're facing right now is deposit fraud, check fraud. So what's new is old. They're literally robbing mail carriers, sorry for guns again, robbing mail carriers, stealing the letters, finding checks, using chemicals to change the addressee, changing the amount, and I mean, they are making a ton of money. But when you look at the risks around just security, and if you look at AI, one of the biggest problems we have is insiders. And when I talk about insiders, I think you automatically go to somebody who's actually trying to do harm, but that you would trust. I'll be honest with you, that's not the biggest problem with insiders. The biggest problems from a security perspective with insiders are people who know the rules but decide they don't apply to them, right? Well, it's nice I'm not supposed to put PII in AI or ChatGPT, but you know what? This is important, and actually they're overreacting. I know I'm not supposed to click on this link or open that attachment, but honestly, it looks important and I should open it. Oh my gosh, right? Then you have the people who really aren't going, the rules don't apply to me, but rather they just made an honest mistake. How often have you put an email and then all of a sudden you send it and oh my gosh, it was something that was proprietary, something that was sensitive, but you just sent it outside the firm, and now you're begging the person to please not open it and recall it. There is some technologies that are helping in that regard, but when you look at insider, no matter whether it's AI, normal security, it really is some of the biggest risks come from your employees, but it's not because they're trying to do something wrong. It's because they don't think the rules apply to them, or we just don't have the right controls to prevent that action from maybe doing harm.
Well, that was most of what we wanted to talk about today. I think what I want the audience to take away today is, first thing from Larry, the way financial crimes people think about it is, why hack in when you can log in? So that is my takeaway from today's evening.
Please, it's not mine. I just used it. But please use it at will, as I clearly have.
But for sure, right? Like with the way emerging tech is evolving and it's becoming so real, so fast, I think it will be foolish to kind of ignore the impact that it has. Money velocity and real-time payments is all amazing only until it isn't. So it's very, very important to kind of address this problem. And it obviously is a behemoth, as Ranjita pointed out. It's a 10 trillion problem. And I want, and I hope that all of you take back the size of this problem and go back knowing better from the session today. Thank you so much. It was a lovely panel, and you've been a lovely audience. Thanks a lot.